Happy Monday. We are in the letter that Paul wrote to the church in Colossae. It's part of the whole prison genre that Paul contributed to. And by the way, there is a genre of prison writing. It's not just New Testament writing. A number of great books have been written by people confined to a prison cell. Letters from a Birmingham jail by Dr. King. Conversations with myself, Nelson Mandela. Thoreau wrote his book on civil disobedience. Pilgrim's Progress was written by John Bunyan when he was in prison. And lots of other books, lots of political leaders. I mean, I remember looking at one point, seeing how many political leaders spent time in prison at various times. Now, not in the U.S. generally, but you get to the Middle East, you get in South and Central America, a lot of the presidents were revolutionaries at one point and spent time in prison. And maybe it's a blessing in the sense that their imprisonment forced them to not do anything. And so they were in one place for a while, and so they ended up writing things down, which otherwise would be lost. We certainly feel that way about about much of the New Testament, like how thankful we are. Paul got put in prison so that he wrote so many of the letters that he wrote. Where would we be if he could have just gone and visited these people? Or, I guess, texted them. Maybe that digital footprint would still be there, I don't know. Well, so we're looking today at verse 24 of chapter 1. Paul writing, we just had that great hymn that was a celebration of Christ. And now Paul goes on, "Now I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I am filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of his body, that is, the church." So Paul is talking about the fact that Christ suffered for us. Sin has to be dealt with in order for us to be free. So I will remind you, God doesn't forgive sin. God forgives sinners. Sin has to be dealt with. Sin has to be paid for. And so we have that great passage, 2 Corinthians 5, that Luther refers to as the Great Exchange, where we, in this big moment of cosmic redemption, we give to Christ our sin. He gives us his righteousness. We're not just forgiven. We're not just neutral. We actually are given credit for Christ's life that he lived. So we, at that point, are justified. It's not that we're made perfect. That would be the process of our sanctification. And when we finally are perfect, which comes on the other side of the grave, we talk about our glorification. But we are declared righteous. When God looks at me, he doesn't see my sin. He sees Christ's righteousness. So here's the question. So Paul says all this, right? Paul is explaining all this, but what Paul says is, it sounds a little disconcerting. I rejoice in my sufferings for your sake, and in my flesh I am filling up what is lacking in Christ's afflictions for the sake of the body, that is the church. It sounds as if Paul is saying the work of Christ on the cross was not sufficient, that Paul was glad to suffer for our sake in order that what was lacking for us to be justified was covered by Paul's addition. If you have listened to me preach, you know that's not what I have suggested. If you've read the early church, you know that's not what the early church taught. You know that's not what the reformers taught. That's not what Billy Graham says, right? I mean, the whole idea is that everything that needs to be done for us to be forgiven was done by Jesus. And there is therefore now no condemnation of those who are in Christ Jesus. And it's not that Jesus did most of it and we just have a little bit left to do. It's that we have everything has been paid for by Christ. Furthermore, it's not just that we don't have to pay. One of the points that is made in the Bible is that we can't pay. We don't have the ability to pay. We are too broken. Our merit is like blue $50 Monopoly bills. Or the orange $500 bills. Yeah, you can collect all you want. Just go try and spend them. They don't actually work in real life. So, not going to answer the question today. Just setting it up. Let me make 3 quick observations on the way out. One, I do want to say works do matter. In fact, they are expected. They not only serve as a confirmation that we have been reconciled to God. Again, it's not faith plus works equals salvation, but faith equals salvation plus works. Works are expected. We see that in James. Additionally, works are expected in that we are saved by works, just not our works. We're saved by the work of Christ. Second thing to note is that suffering is a part of life. Paul talks about, willingly suffering. Suffering is a part of life. Number 3, suffering is a part of life in a broken world. Number 3, leaders are often called upon to suffer on behalf of the people they are leading. With that, I will leave you. Have a good day.